The Veiled Christ, Part 2. In the first part of the video on the Veiled Christ, we explored how this Baroque masterpiece in Naples Sansevero Chapel stuns viewers with its emotional power and technical audacity. Commissioned by the esoteric prince Raimondo di Sangro, sculptor Giuseppe Sanmartino transformed the project after the death of initial artist Antonio Corradini, rejecting Rococo elegance for raw Baroque pathos. Carved from a single block of marble, Sanmartino achieved the impossible: a damp veil clinging to Christ's emaciated body, revealing wounds and anatomy through masterful light-shadow interplay. Despite legends of alchemical fabric petrification sparked by di Sangro's mystique, documentary evidence confirms the veil is pure sculpture. The work's haunting realism, palpable veins, passion tools, and its illusion of weightless stone cemented its status as an eternal artistic miracle, proving that Sanmartino's genius transcended stone itself. The patron, Raimondo di Sangro, Prince of Enlightenment and Esotericism. To fully understand the Veiled Christ and the entire Sansevero Chapel, it is essential to analyze the figure of its patron and creator, Raimondo di Sangro, the seventh Prince of Sansevero. He was not merely a patron, but the programmatic mind behind every detail, a man whose complex and multifaceted personality is reflected in every corner of his mausoleum. Born in Torre Maggiore in 1710, Raimondo di Sangro had a childhood marked by the premature death of his mother. His education was entrusted to the Jesuits of the Roman seminary, where he remained for 10 years, absorbing a vast encyclopedic culture. He studied not only the classics, but also chemistry, mechanics, history, and languages, including Hebrew. During his Roman years, he was profoundly influenced by the works and natural history museum of the Jesuit Athanasius Kircher, a 17th-century polymath whose writings were imbued with references to the Hermetic tradition and Egyptian wisdom, an interest that would mark his entire intellectual journey. Upon returning to Naples, he became one of the most prominent figures in the Bourbon capital. His insatiable curiosity translated into a feverish activity as an inventor and scientist, earning him fame throughout Europe. His inventions ranged from the military field, an innovative breech-loading musket and new infantry strategies praised by Louis XIII of France and Frederick II of Prussia, to the civil sphere, a hydraulic machine, an amphibious carriage, waterproof fabrics. He passionately dedicated himself to pyrotechnics, creating fireworks with unprecedented colors, and to printing, developing multicolor printing processes of exceptional quality. His interest in science extended even to anatomy, as evidenced by the famous and macabre anatomical machines. These are two skeletons, one male and one female, upon which the entire arterial venous network has been reproduced with astonishing precision. Created by the Palermo physician Giuseppe Salerno under his direction, the exact technique used to achieve such preservation remains a subject of debate to this day, contributing to the aura of mystery surrounding the prince. The most controversial and influential dimension of Raimondo di Sangro's life was his adherence to Freemasonry. He became the first Grand Master of all Neapolitan lodges, a role that placed him at the center of a dense network of intellectuals and aristocrats promoting ideals of free thought and progress. This affiliation is the keystone for deciphering the complex symbolic language of the Sansevero Chapel. However, his Masonic activity brought him into open conflict with the Catholic Church and with King Charles of Bourbon himself. In 1751, following Pope Benedict XIV's papal bull Provitas and a royal edict, Freemasonry was condemned, and di Sangro was forced into a humiliating public renunciation to avoid worse consequences. His rebellious spirit and unorthodox thinking also found expression in his writings. His most famous work, The Apologetic Letter, was an erudite and provocative text, printed using his innovative printing techniques, but with content so controversial that it was judged by church authorities to be a cesspool of all heresies. The work was promptly placed on the Index of Prohibited Books, and the prince had to strenuously defend himself against the accusations, though he ultimately failed to have the condemnation revoked. The project of the chapel, a symbolic temple. It is within this context of genius, conflict, and mystery that his most enduring project takes shape, the transformation of the family mausoleum into a unique masterpiece. Raimondo di Sangro was not only the patron who paid the artists, but the true and proper conceptor of the artistic apparatus. He conceived the entire iconographic program, personally selected the sculptors, Corradini, Cairolo, Sanmartino, and even intervened on technical aspects, such as the development of special and long-lasting pigments for the ceiling frescoes, which still appear vivid today without ever having been restored. Under his direction, the Sansevero Chapel ceases to be a simple burial place to become a Masonic temple laden with symbolism, an allegorical and initiatory path toward knowledge. Every element is part of a coherent discourse. The labyrinthine floor, today largely lost but whose design remains, symbolizes the difficult path of man toward truth. The statues of the virtues that adorn the walls are not only funerary monuments, but represent the stages of moral and spiritual perfection. The statues dedicated to his parents, Pudicitia, Modesty, for his mother, and Disingano, Disillusion, for his father, intertwine family history with moral allegory and are laden with Hermetic and Masonic references, alluding to liberation from error and veiled wisdom. In this sense, the chapel becomes a sort of esoteric and intellectual autobiography of the prince. Every work reflects an aspect of his complex personality and his worldview. The anatomical machines in the crypt are the most theatrical and unsettling manifestation of his passion for science and the investigation of nature's mysteries. At the center of this symbolic universe, the veiled Christ represents the culmination of the journey, death not as an end, but as a necessary passage for rebirth and the attainment of supreme knowledge, a key theme of both esoteric Christianity and Masonic initiation. The chapel, therefore, is not a simple container of masterpieces, but a coded three-dimensional text in which Raimondo di Sangro inscribed his entire existence. Family history, intellectual ambitions, and his spiritual path. The Sansevero Chapel as a Baroque Gesamtkunstwerk. The Sansevero Chapel, in its 18th century configuration desired by Raimondo di Sangro, is a perfect example of Gesamtkunstwerk, a total work of art in which architecture, sculpture, and painting merge to create a single, complex message. The structure, originally a small, late 16th century votive temple later expanded in the 17th century as a family mausoleum, was radically transformed by the prince starting in the 1740s. He conceived it as a stage for a dense allegorical drama, where every statue, every bas-relief, every decorative detail contributed to a unitary discourse of a philosophical, esoteric, and initiatory nature. Veiled Christ, Sanmartino, versus Modesty, Corradini. The most illuminating comparison for understanding Sanmartino's uniqueness is with Modesty, created by Antonio Corradini in 1752, just 1 year earlier. This work, dedicated to the memory of the prince's mother, Cecilia Gaetani, is the last and most sublime expression of the series of veiled women that made Corradini famous throughout Europe. His technique is impeccable. The marble veil, rendered with a wet effect, adheres to the sinuous body of the figure, revealing its forms with a refined and almost otherworldly sensuality. Modesty is a masterpiece of Rococo elegance and grace. The veil is a pretext for an exercise in virtuosity that arouses wonder, but conceptually remains a drapery superimposed on an idealized body. When Giuseppe Sanmartino tackles the same technical theme in the Veiled Christ, he completely overturns its meaning and emotional impact. He accepts the challenge of the veil, but shifts it from a plane of aesthetic elegance to one of profound dramatic pathos. His veil is not a decorative accessory, but becomes one with the flesh of the suffering Christ. It adheres to the wounds, hollows over the tormented side, follows the contractions of the muscles, transmitting a profound suffering that is palpable. If Corradini's veil is ethereal and sensual, Sanmartino's is tragic and laden with emotional weight. It is the stylistic and conceptual passage from the aesthetics of wonder, typical of Rococo, to the ethics of pain, characteristic of late Neapolitan Baroque. Sanmartino demonstrates that he has assimilated the lesson of Corradini's virtuosity but has surpassed it, integrating it into a more complex, human, and spiritually intense artistic vision. Dialogues with art history. Another significant comparison, often cited by critics, is with Andrea Mantegna's famous Dead Christ in the Sepulchre, 1475 to 1478. Here, too, the parallel serves more to highlight differences than similarities. Mantegna's work is a masterpiece of perspectival rigor and almost scientific analysis of the corpse. The body is locked in a foreshortened view, dramatic but intellectual, almost a Renaissance perspective cage. Sanmartino, conversely, operates within the Baroque open form. His composition is fluid, dynamic. Christ's body seems still traversed by a final vital vibration, heightened by the wave-like movement of the shroud. Mantegna freezes death in an anatomical and pitiless snapshot. Sanmartino renders it an event still alive and throbbing, a drama still unfolding before the viewer's eyes. Critical reception and cultural legacy. The reaction to the Veiled Christ was, from the very beginning, one of astonished wonder. The work quickly became one of Naples' main attractions, a miracle of art that profoundly marked the imagination of anyone fortunate enough to see it. The Sansevero Chapel and its masterpiece became an essential stop for cultured travelers undertaking the grand tour of Italy in the second half of the 18th century. Their accounts, filled with admiration, helped spread its fame throughout Europe. Among these illustrious visitors, the name of the Marquis de Sade stands out. During his travels in Italy, upon arriving in Naples in 1775, he visited the chapel and was deeply impressed. In his travel memoirs, he specifically praised the Veiled Christ, admiring the drapery, the fineness of the veil, the beauty, the regularity of the proportions of the whole. His testimony is particularly valuable because, while recognizing the artistic genius, he also notes the chapel's state of partial abandonment after the prince's death, which had occurred just a few years earlier. The Canova case, between history and myth. One of the most famous and oft-cited testimonies regarding the Veiled Christ is that attributed to Antonio Canova, the foremost exponent of neoclassical sculpture. Popular tradition and numerous sources report that Canova, upon seeing the statue, exclaimed that he would be willing to give 10 years of his life to be its author. It is also said that he tried in vain to purchase the sculpture, recognizing its priceless value. However, a critical analysis of historical sources calls for caution. Despite its enormous popularity, this famous quote finds no corroboration in contemporary documents and may be an apocryphal anecdote that arose later to amplify the work's fame. Instead, there exists a direct and documented testimony offering a different perspective. In an entry from his travel diary dated February 2, 1780, Canova describes his visit to the Sansevero Chapel. In his account, he explicitly mentions and admires the veiled statue made by Corradini, that is, the Modesty, even recording its inscription, but makes no mention of Sanmartino's Veiled Christ. This discrepancy between myth and documented reality is highly significant. The anecdote, whether true or false, serves a precise cultural function, that of canonizing a Baroque masterpiece through the approval of the greatest master of the opposing style, neoclassicism. Canova's imprimatur elevates the Veiled Christ beyond stylistic disputes, consecrating it as a universal and transhistorical masterpiece. Historical reality, however, suggests that the initial critical reception may have been different. It is possible that in 1780, the work of Corradini, a Venetian artist like Canova and a recognized master of the veil, struck the sculptor more profoundly. The subsequent unstoppable rise of the Veiled Christ as the chapel's absolute icon likely attracted the anecdote to itself, reassigning it from Corradini's work to Sanmartino's. This process demonstrates how the critical reception of a work of art is a dynamic phenomenon, capable of retroactively constructing its own mythology to solidify its status. Over the centuries, the Veiled Christ has become a universal icon of Naples, a powerful symbol of the city's culture and identity, perpetually suspended between ardent faith, artistic genius, and an impenetrable sense of mystery. Its image has transcended the boundaries of the art world to enter the collective imagination. It continues to be an inexhaustible source of inspiration for artists, writers, musicians, and filmmakers. An emblematic example of its cultural reach is the use of its image for the cover of a famous recording of Mozart's Requiem, conducted by Maestro Riccardo Muti, underscoring the universal link between the work, grief, death, and hope in transcendence. Conclusion: Beyond the Veil. First and foremost, the veiled Christ reveals itself to be the pinnacle of the technical virtuosity of the late Baroque. Giuseppe Sanmartino's skill in transforming a block of marble into an impalpable shroud remains a unique achievement in art history, a feat that continues to challenge our understanding of matter. Secondly, it is an object of profound religious devotion. Its raw realism and intense pathos invite meditation on the Passion of Christ, transforming suffering into a universal symbol of humanity's destiny and redemption. The masterpiece we admire today is the result of an unrepeatable synergy that between the executive genius of an extraordinary artist, Giuseppe Sanmartino, and the intellectual, programmatic, and esoteric vision of a uniquely original patron, Raimondo di Sangro. Nearly 3 centuries after its creation, the Veiled Christ continues to fulfill the mission entrusted to it by its creator, to be made with such art as to astonish the most skilled observers. It remains an enigma in marble that never ceases to question, move, and fascinate all who stand before it.